Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins, and it's a real pleasure today to be joined by Julie Cottineau. Julie, you're very welcome to the show. Let's begin by maybe asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do for our worldwide audience today. So over to you, Julie.
Great. Thank you, Simon, for having me. So I am a brand passionista. I am passionate about all things brand. Specifically, I'm a branding consultant, author, teacher, and expert.
So tell us a little bit about when it comes to being a branding expert, because in today's modern, fast-moving, globally connected world, being a brand expert takes a bit of homework, I would assume.
Yeah, I've been doing my homework, I think, now for 35 years. So I've always been in advertising. I worked for Gray Global here in New York, where I'm based, and in France, which is how I rebranded myself to this French last name. I married a Frenchman that I met when I was over there. I worked for Interbrand. I had the pleasure of running the Virgin brand here in the US and working with Sir Richard Branson. And I started my own company, BrandTwist, 13 years ago, actually in September. But I've really been branding and innovating since I was a little girl. When I was growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, my parents wouldn't let me have a pet because my brother was very allergic to pet dander. And this was the days before, hypoallergenic dogs and cats. But because I was 8 and didn't take no for an answer, I went into my garden. I took a rock, I put the rock in a Cool Whip container, plastic Tupperware. I poked holes so the rock could breathe and put grass in there. And I came to my parents and I said, I have a pet now. I have a pet rock. And this was about 2 years before the official pet rock was created by Gary Dahl, an advertising copywriter in San Francisco. So I've always been looking at innovative ways to create new solutions. I wish I had been able to monetize it, but in my defense, I was 8.
I think that's a strong defense case. Well, look, it's great to have you here. And obviously, the Grey Group is known to many. And of course, Virgin is a global brand in itself. And I know you looked after the brand as a VP of brand, which is you need 2 long stints there as well. And of course, since then, we come on to things like being the founder and CEO of BrandTwist, as you mentioned, and also creator and dean of Brand School. But tell us a little bit more about this word twist, because it features a lot in the work that you're doing at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, twisting is really my religion. It's the title of my book. It's what drew me to Virgin in the first place. But twisting is really looking for that unique angle, whether it's your personal brand or your business brand. It's not enough. It's never been enough, but it's certainly not enough today just to be really trustworthy or high quality or competent. If you were talking about your personal brand, we have to have something unique. And that's the twist. If you think about, Simon, a great book that you've read or a Netflix show, usually the ones that we recommend passionately to friends and family are the ones that stood out. Maybe they had a plot twist, something unexpected. So that's really where my point of view on branding is: how do we find the twist? And how do we do that? And how we do that actually is looking outside of your category. So if you're a health coach, or if you're in a technology company that focuses on education, don't look at what your competitors are doing, because they're pretty much doing the same thing. I can guarantee if you printed out your competitive audit and you crossed out the name and the logo on the top of most of the websites, for the most part, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. So what I say is look at brands that are outside of your category, that have a great twist, that have something that really stands out, and then twist those lessons with your own brand. And that's how you come up with fresh ideas.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear. I was only talking to somebody earlier today as we record this about how a lot of the big influencers, a lot of the big corporate brands, a lot of the pop culture sort of community is connecting to add that twist, whether it's Pharrell Williams and Louis Vuitton or lots of other sort of brand mashups and collaborations at that sort of global scale. But also the thing I want to ask you is this twist, this human element to it, this emotional feeling that you need to put across or that maybe people need to experience or feel. It's getting a little difficult with this thing called AI, which is sort of reared up on the horizon and seems to be taking over the world. So, what's your view when it comes to branding, whether it's personal branding or business branding, and AI? Is it helping us? Is it hindering us? How do we leverage AI while still maintaining this twist, Julie?
Yeah, I'm actually putting out a new thought piece now, which is really timely because it's AI friend or foe. And I think it's both, but in the most part, I think it can be a friend. You just really know, you need to know how to be the creative director, how to manage it, and not just let it dumb down your branding. So what AI does when you ask it a question is it answers right away. I use ChatGPT probably 10 times a day, but you have to ask the right question and you have to think outside of your category. So if I'm working with a client and they want to write some copy, I'll have them write the copy first, but then I'll put it into Claude or ChatGPT and I'll say, rewrite this with the tone of voice of Nike or Apple or Serena Williams or Boston, like whatever brand it is that you admire, and do that multiple times. And then find a way to choose the bits that you're most excited about. Because if you just say, write an introductory copy, I'm I don't know, a new swimsuit brand, it's going to just pull up from its vast network of what all the other swimsuit brands do, right? And then you're launching with copy and branding that's really not differentiated. So if you're the creative director, you can use it as a really clever tool. Similarly, on a personal brand, which is a big passion of mine, tell it what you're passionate about. I had a client who was a really great kitchen designer, very high-end kitchen designer, and she was going out there with all the messaging about the awards that she's won and her style and how she works. And, it was kind of like wah, 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 wah. And I said, well, let's look at something more personal about you. And it turns out that she was an avid amateur ballroom dancer. And it wasn't something that she was bringing into her branding because she didn't think that it had anything to do with designing great kitchens. But we did one of those Venn diagrams where you look for the overlap in the middle: partnership, moving in step, flow, elegance. Anyway, long story short, she rebranded as kitchen choreography.
Makes a
And
lot of
really stood
sense.
out.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I love that. And maybe a small parallel would be you mentioning the fact that you were sort of the unofficial inventor of the pet rock. It makes you stand out because automatically you go, oh, there's something different about Julie, from an early age, 8 years, as you say.
Yeah.
You were already branding, you're already thinking about things. And I wanted to come onto the topic. I'm glad that you come onto the topic of personal branding because I read recently an article by Forbes, and I know you're a contributor to Forbes and Entrepreneur Magazine and CNN, The Economist, all the big brands you contribute and support. But I wanted to come on to personal branding because I read recently an article in Forbes where it was said about employees of global brands are becoming almost as beneficial, if not more beneficial, to being able to promote a brand than the actual brand itself. That the messaging that's coming out of these sort of personal brands or the employees of organizations is so important, and that it only takes a few sort of key employees to be able to really enhance a corporate brand. You must see that as a sort of brand specialist with a particular passion for personal brand, that employees can be really important to their companies these days from a branding perspective, can't they?
Yes, and the number one employee, the chief brand manager, is the CEO. So when I work with clients, I insist that the CEO gets involved. And I know from a lot of the studies that I've read also that in particular, Gen Z wants to work at a company, not this just that makes money or, is in their field of interest, but whose values they believe in. So it's really important that the CEO pays attention to her or his personal brand, that it's in line with corporate values. And then you're right, people buy from people. People want to work with people. So teaching your employees how to develop their own personal brands in support of what your business brand is promoting is going to strengthen client relationships, is going to work better in pitches. If they touch social media, or you have an informal or formal brand ambassador program, giving them the tools to express that is really important. And sometimes with companies, when I bring up personal brand, they say, oh, well, if we help all of our employees have stronger personal brands, they're just going to use that on the job market. And my reaction is, no, they're not. They're going to look for a job if they're going to look for a job, because that means you're not giving them maybe the right opportunities in-house, or just sometimes we need to switch jobs to grow. But I've switched jobs and remained a very loyal, alumni of Virgin, of Interbrand, of Gray. I still work with a lot of those former friends and colleagues. But I think in the short term, helping them with their personal brand is going to mean when they're doing a sales call or a pitch or just building rapport with the client, the client is going to feel like they're talking to an actual human being who has interests beyond just the product.
That makes a lot of sense. And you were talking there about, getting the chief executive involved in some of these large brands. And that to me sounds like the right thing to do, but often I'm imagining a very challenging thing to do, because C-suite executives are normally some of the busiest people in the organization. They may not be at the very front end of the business, but they are certainly very, very busy all the time. So when it comes to getting maybe a C-suite executive or the chief executive in your particular example to engage when maybe they're not that au fait with social media, they don't use it in a personal environment. They're constantly busy in meetings, flying around the world, worrying about the share price for the shareholders, etc., thinking about that next big deal. Are there any tips for how you sort of encourage the executive to get involved? Because it sounds great and I fully support it, but I'm imagining it's not an easy thing to do.
It's not easy at first, but I think it's really important to do brand education with the CEO, because most CEOs have come up the ranks not through marketing. I mean, let's be honest, they've usually come up through sales, product development, sometimes finance. And when you get to a certain point, it's hard to admit that you don't really understand brand. So in a very non-threatening way, what I do is I give them a lot of examples of other CEOs, Richard Branson included, whose personal brand as a rebel, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who won't accept the status quo, really adds credibility to the Virgin brand, which is always looking for new ideas and new ways to satisfy consumers. I also connect brand to business. So when you say they have more important things like building shareholder value, what I would say is your most important asset in building shareholder value is your brand. Because there are many other companies out there that sell what you do, that have good products and services. But if you're differentiating yourself on a unique approach, on customer service, on having great employees, and you're not really paying attention to those things, because when I talk about brand, I don't mean your name and your logo. I mean the whole experience, internal and employee value proposition, that at some point it's going to hit the wall. I mean, how many of us have taken a job or worked with a company that we've really admired from the exterior, only to find out interior, it doesn't really work that way. They don't live the brand values. And that kind of thing, it comes out on Glassdoor, it comes out just in talking to people, it comes out in social. I don't think a CEO needs to be on Instagram, but I think when they have the opportunity to do a keynote speech, to be in an investor presentation, to speak at a university. I mean, hiring is the #1 issue for many of the high growth companies that I work with. And those kids, I have two very recently grads, a 23-year-old and a 27-year-old. They can smell insincerity, a mile away. So getting the story about why you created the company or why you lead the company, if you weren't the founder, what's different about it, why people love to work there, knowing your actual employees and the contributions that they've made, that's going to get somebody to come see you at the job fair or get the highest quality people to send in their resume and to stay longer if you're lucky enough to engage them. So I think your brand is your business, and you really shouldn't separate the two.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it comes back to what you're talking about, doesn't it? That culture, that engagement, and whether it's new employees looking at your company, that there's certain elements of your culture, your ethos, what you stand for, that's so important to people, whether they're looking for jobs today or deciding which company to buy from. All that stuff really matters now. Whether it's your supply chain, your eco credentials, whether you actually, as you say, live your brand values, they're all critical things. Now, one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times that I want to come back to, if I can, Julie, is this danger, I think, that because everybody can almost create content at will now just by pressing a button on a large language model, some kind of chat GPT or Gemini interface, there is this danger that everybody just becomes the same, isn't it? So the human aspect of that seems to me to be more important now than ever if you're trying to reach somebody.
Absolutely. And I think that's why you really have to ask yourself, whether you're a candidate or a current employee, why me? What is it about me and my passions and my skill set and my childhood or my past experience? And sometimes those are good experiences and sometimes they're bad experiences. I have many clients who've started businesses because they saw a need that wasn't being filled. I have a client who started a business to really revolutionize elder care because she had a horrible time looking after her own mother. And she couldn't find the right resources. So if you should be prepared in your elevator pitch, and you can, in your cover note, you can hint at this, that this isn't just, I'm qualified, I studied this, I have experience, but here's what's unique about my approach, or here's a personal passion that's led me here. My own son was just looking for a job in sports media, which is super, super competitive. And together we actually put like a visual roadmap of his experience. And he talked about the fact that he'd been selling soccer or football, since he was young, and why he was interested, because he has a European father, and, the experiences growing up in a high school that was obsessed with American football, and how, being on the soccer team, that frustrated him. So he went and explained all the ways he's been selling soccer organically as part of his personality. He had it written down, he had it rehearsed as a story, but he also put it as a sort of visual storyboard. And he got his dream internship, and now he works for a New York City Major League Soccer team in the sales department. And that's very different than saying I studied sports media at a top school. It's showing a personal connection. And the people who were interviewing him really loved it, because it's hard to be an interviewer also. It's hard to get a sense of a person. Most of the time you're reading their resume as you're walking into the conference room or getting on the Zoom call. So to be able to relax and have somebody tell you a story about who they are and why they're a good fit, or what they'd like to contribute to your organization, it's really refreshing.
I love the story because it sort of helped him stand out. It helped him break through, right? And I think that's so important. And when we're talking about this twist, human twist, or I should say brand twist, not only are you sort of working and living in this environment, but you wrote the book on it. And I want to
Yes.
ask you about the book if I can,
Yeah.
because you've wrote this book. So what was the process like? How did you go about writing the book? For people that get a copy of Twist, what can they expect to find in there?
Well, I've always wanted to write a book. And about a few years after I launched my business, I realized that I was repeating the same stories and the same exercises over and over again. And so why not write them down? And the book is really about a very elemental approach to branding, but it's got tons of case studies. It's well, actually, I'll just show you a copy here. It's light, it's short, and in the back, it has pages and pages where you could just take notes. So the thing that I'm most happy about is when I meet with somebody and they show me, oh, I just read your book, and they've got it all crumpled because it's been in their backpack or it's been in their back pocket, and they show me all the notes that they've taken. Because one of the things that I was trying to do, having worked for very big companies that I really love and admire and I still work with, but a lot of times the approach to branding was a little bit theoretical. Was sort of, we are going to educate you in branding. And my personality is very action oriented. So what I did, how I wanted to stand out, was to make branding not theory, but action. It's a little bit like, I don't care if you make the perfect cake. I just want you to try. I think you get better by practicing, right? You get better. And Richard Branson believes in that too. I learned a lot of that from him. It's fail harder, just always be trying something. So I think what you'll get from Twist is a theory framework, but tons of examples of the framework in action and space to apply it to your own branding challenges.
I love that, and I love the Richard Branson element too, because I love the stories of Richard Branson. I've read most of the books, I think, and whether he's hot air ballooning or crossing the Atlantic or doing something, he's hard to ignore. But I love the story of Necker Island and how he ended up buying Necker Island. I think it's a wonderful story for people who haven't read it. They should go and check that out, and how he bought the island next to it and when it burnt down and everything. I mean, it's an incredible story of challenges and opportunities. An
And
incredible.
he is his twist to starting an airline, sorry to interrupt you, is
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
he didn't know anything. He was a virgin in the airline business, but he knew about rock and roll and music. And he had a particular experience where he needed to charter a plane
Mm.
because his traditional airline was having issues and he needed to get somewhere. And he took a piece of paper in the small airport, and he put Virgin on it, and he wanted to share, the cost with people. But what he was reacting to, and he talks about this in his books, was at the time in the UK, it was sort of dominated by British Airways, which is a great brand, and it's safe and it gets where you want to go, but it's a different kind of atmosphere. It's a little bit more I don't know, classic, let's say that. And he's not that way. He is a CEO, as you said, who works from a hammock in the Virgin Islands, who wears jeans. So he wanted Virgin Atlantic to be a rock and roll way to fly because he knew about the music industry. And, 50 plus years later, it's still going strong. So that's what I mean. If you're going into the airline industry and you look at what all the other airlines are doing, you're going to get to the same thing. And actually, my inspiration from the twist, if I tell you a short story, came from an airline as well. When I was working for Interbrand, I was, big global consultancy. I was seeing clients all over the US, and I was at the airport all the time. And I was at the airport one day, and I saw on the tarmac this airplane parked with McDonald's golden arches on the tail fin. And I stopped in my tracks and I thought, wow, most airlines feel kind of the same. I bet this one would be really different. And it wasn't so much that I thought they would have McNuggets on board, but McDonald's as a brand, it's easy. It's easy to order. It's easy to supersize. So I thought maybe I could be, booked to my economy seat, get on the plane, realize it was really crowded, and supersize to first class, on the spot. Anyway, long story short, it was a mirage. It was the reflection of the food court on the window, and there happened to be a plane parked there. And as soon as I realized that, I thought, okay, it doesn't exist. But then my passion for this methodology for twisting was born. And I started doing that at Interbrand, and that's what caught the eye of Virgin, where I learned to be an entrepreneur and then launched my own business, because that's, their philosophy. You don't need to be another cell phone company or airline or hotel. We need to do it differently. People aren't looking for another choice. They're looking for a unique choice. Quality, trustworthiness, safety, that's table stakes. You shouldn't even be considering a brand if it doesn't offer you that. But then what's next? What's a level up from that?
Couldn't agree more. Love everything that you're saying, Julie. It's fantastic. Before we run out of time, I want to ask you a little bit about brand school and brand safaris and the different ways that you go about helping people with their brands, because you've got a few strings to this bow, haven't you?
Yeah, and adding more all the time. That's the curse of the entrepreneur. Well, I'll start with brand safaris because I'm super excited about those. And I think in the world of AI, these are even more needed, more than ever, in the world of remote work. So brand safaris, we actually get together in real life, usually in cities. I've done them in Europe, done them in the US, where we isolate a branding challenge. And then we go to great brand experiences that are not in the client's category, but we soak up. We have notebooks and cameras and little safari kits. And we go to each of these curated locations, take tons of notes, and then immediately, either that day or the next day, apply those lessons and twist them with the client's brand. And I've done that for Virgin, I've done that for Spotify, for Bear, for tons of different clients, and it always works. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a great team building, because right now people are working in their home offices. At least in the US, we're trying to get people back into the office with kind of like forced fun. And people are realizing it doesn't make sense to go in just to go in, but to go in and do something together where we can learn and have fun and get some fresh air. It's amazing. And so I love doing those. Anybody interested, I can give you a ton more information. I'm also doing, we're relaunching Brand School. Brand School is a online program with a very experiential focus to it. So we're updating all of our materials for that. And I do a lot of one-on-one personal, I call it VIP coaching for entrepreneurs, authors, CEOs, small and large businesses, where we twist together. We give you lots of examples and a lot of fun techniques like brand haikus and brand safaris and lots of things like that to work on your right brain, the right side of your brain. So it's not just about being strategic, but it's also being creative, but creativity with a purpose, right? Creativity that's going to help you stand out, connect with your customers, build stakeholder and shareholder value.
Fantastic. And as you look forward then, because you've so much going on, Julie, as you look forward and you think about the next 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 24 months, how does planning work in your world? What's on your horizon? What are you looking at? What are you hoping to achieve in the future? How does that work in your world?
So I'm a big believer in brand roadmaps, and I usually use my summertime to plan them. So you've got me at a good time. Um, and I use something that a friend of mine created called the Halo Profit Model, where you take a line of your business. So for me, for example, I'll take a learning line of my business and I'll have 4 offerings. And what varies in each of the offerings is my involvement. And so I do that for each of my lines of business. I do that for corporate branding, for brand school. Yeah, I have some other projects that I can't talk about yet that are happening, another book in the works, but, and I look at, okay, who's the target for each of these? What do they need? I look at my pricing. Should it shift? You know, is it a good value? Am I answering what people need? Which is why right now I'm focused on creating this workshops and thought pieces around AI, because that's the question that I'm getting a lot now. You know, from creative people, am I going to lose my job because of AI? I don't think so, but I don't think you can do things business as usual. And from, you know, clients, well, do I really need to hire somebody internally or an agency? Can I just use AI? And I think you do, but they have to be somebody who's comfortable being a creative director and using all the tools that are out there. So I do a roadmap. I look at my offerings. I do it once a year minimum. And then you know, all branding starts with the who. Who are we here to serve? So I frequently re-examine my ideal target.
Wonderful. And is there anything that we haven't touched on today, Julie? Or maybe it is something we've talked about that you want to expand on that you'd like to share with our worldwide audience?
Well, I would say pay attention to your personal brand, because I think especially, I mean, it's been this way for a while, but especially as things are becoming more about artificial intelligence, right? The counterpoint to that is human intelligence. So are you showing up as a human with passions and unique experiences, or are you just showing up as, you know, somebody who's got X amount of years and a degree? And I think that the biggest mistake that people make, whether they're a new college grad or a Fortune 100 CEO, and I work with both of them on their personal brand, is they think it's just my personality. It's just organic. It's just natural. It'll just come out. And that's not true. Just like you would never, I hope, not have a plan for your business, you have to have a plan for your personal brand. So we do, for example, personal brand planning, where we say, how am I perceived today? How do I want to be perceived in the future? And what are the gaps? You know, am I perceived as a young person, for example, as somebody who's just kind of hip and cool? Would I move up in my company if I was perceived as more of a trend fluent? And then how do I bridge that? You know, maybe you need to start sending out an email every Monday. Hey, here's what's going on, you know, in the culture, and here's how it applies to our business. Anybody curious about this? Let's have lunch, right? But having a plan to manage your own personal brand is really important. And your other brand.
Yeah, for sure. And for anybody who's watching or listening to this episode around the world that needs a little bit of help with their brand, whether it's personal brand or their business brand, you know, small, medium, or global enterprise brand level, if somebody needs a little bit of a brand twist, where's the best place for people to find out more about you, about the book, about all the great work you're doing, Julie? Where do we point people to?
The simplest place is to go to brandtwist.com, and you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, it says for corporations, and there's a drop-down menu, or for entrepreneurs. And there's a bit about the book there as well. You can also get it on Amazon, but when you get it from me, I always throw in a little extra goodies, some worksheets and fun stuff. I'm also a big believer in LinkedIn. It's the social media that I spend the most time on. In fact, once a week, I publish either a twist over case study, or I just did something on branding lessons I learned from my father for Father's Day. And I have, if you message me or comment on a post, I will absolutely engage with you. I'm 100% love meeting new people and having new conversations on LinkedIn. So those are the easiest. You can also email me, Julie at BrandTwist. And unlike Cottineau, I think there's only one way to spell Julie. So it's Julie, Julie at BrandTwist, and I will get back to you.
Look, that brings us lovely to the end of our discussion today, Julie. I want to thank everybody who's watching or listening to us around the world, and make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help support the show. And hopefully you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers just like Julie. But Julie, it's been a real pleasure to catch up with you today. Thanks very much for being a guest on the Global Discussion.
Thanks so much for having me. I had fun.